Welcome to another Divorce Workshop Talk Live. Today we have Shauna back on to talk about having a high conflict divorce. Today we're talking about part 3, the holidays, which is fast approaching for everybody. I also want to let you know that, hi. Good morning or good afternoon.
Am I too early?
No, you're perfect timing.
Okay.
You're perfect timing. So the holidays are coming up, and part 3 of our Breaking Bad series is all about the holidays.
Yes.
So, first of all, do you want to introduce just a quick introduction, even though you're on here a lot?
Sure. I am Shauna Warden. I'm a divorce coach that is based in Richmond, Virginia. I seem to focus a lot on co-parenting, which, I love to always lend my voice to it. I have not mastered it myself yet, but I feel like there's always something new to learn. But, I'm happy to share what I have learned so far with everybody.
Good. So I want to start off today with talking about what makes it more challenging, do you think, with the holidays, with a high conflict? Like, we know in general, Shauna, how stressful Christmas is, right? Like it is for non-divorced people, and it's difficult for divorcing people, but something about it's just a tad more challenging when you're dealing with someone that is toxic or difficult. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree. I think that, like you said, part of it is that everyone's emotions are already heightened during this time of year. There's so much to do. And I think, at least for me, that was part of it, was shifting from the expectations I had about what activities I wanted to do, the things I wanted to take my kids to, and did those line up with the days that I have them? And if not, like, does that make sense? So December is already a very quick month, full of lots of things. And then if you share custody, you cut that time in half. And so it makes it even more stressful. And if things only happen on a certain day and they don't line up with the days that you have your kids, for me, that kind of just sends me into a panic, because we have these false expectations in our head of how we want the holiday to go. Then you throw in the bomb that is this person who is already hell-bent on making your life miserable. And it's like so stressful. I mean, I know there's a couple years where I'm like, can we just skip to January? I don't even want to do this, but you have to, because your kids, they don't know what's going on, hopefully, on the inside or in the background.
Well, think about Christmas concerts or holiday concerts, right? Like that dreaded where, oh my goodness, I have, I'm going to see them, right? Like most of us in more conflict challenging divorces are not having beautiful, friendly transition times, right? We're doing them quietly and stuff if we're doing it well, but we're not having nice civil conversations, right? So all of a sudden you're showing up at, the Christmas time or the holiday, like the event at school, and you're like, you can tell even your nervous system starts getting affected, right? And
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And, the sad thing is, we're there to support our child, but sometimes you can barely even pay attention to what your child is doing, because in your peripheral, you're like, oh, they're on their phone the whole time. Oh, we can't even sit together. It's like this whole choir in your own head of voices going on about what this other person is doing. And if their family is there, it's just the more people involved, or did they bring the new girlfriend, or you know what I mean? Do people know that we're not sitting together because of X, Y, and Z? And really, it's just pay attention to to your kid doing their thing. And sadly, sometimes that's the last thing that we're paying attention to.
Yeah, it's pretty common that we kind of get too worried about everything else when our kids are singing up stage or something. But yeah, and another thing is I want to talk to you about, it also would probably, you're the more co-parenting expert, is it shows up in co-parenting plan problems, I would, with the high conflict, right?
Yes. And so a lot of clients that I work with, especially this time, I don't know about your business, but my business skyrockets during the holidays because it's just, you know, I don't know why it's that time of year, but then especially for newly divorced or newly separated people, it's, what is the schedule? What's fair? And I thought that I would die if I did not have my kid waking up
Mm,
at my house on Christmas morning. You could not tell me that that was going to happen, but now it's like, I think just this year, and we're 8 years in, I'm like, oh man, you know what? I'm kind of happy that this is the year that he comes over at noon because then we have the whole rest of the day for him to play with his toys and to
mm-hmm,
relax. Those mornings, those years where he is here, I love, running down the steps and seeing what Santa brought. You can't buy that, you want to
mm-hmm,
bottle that up. But then it's like, okay, hurry up, we're on a timeline. Open the presents, eat the cinnamon rolls, and dad's here. You know what I mean? And
mm-hmm,
so, but it's just things that you learn through experience after you go through a few years of how is this looking? How is this working? Does this even work for me? So I think a lot of it is trial and error, but with again, newly separated individuals trying to come up with a schedule, it's so emotional.
mm-hmm. Yeah, the holidays are, and also the element of a lot of grief there as well that I want to touch down.
Yes. Yes. And if you don't have your whatever your calendar looks like, if you don't have your children that day or whatever time you want, it really can feel
Mm-hmm,
lonely. It can feel depressing. You can get really sucked into a dark hole. So I certainly recommend having some sort of plan,
mm-hmm.
well, based on what your schedule looks like and making sure that you've got a support system.
Yeah, yeah, plan something, whatever, right? Friends, family, um, whatever you need to do. But definitely it's good
Hmm.
advice to plan. So I want to also ask, like I'll say how it shows up for me, but how do they show up? Do you find like they can play with our emotions or our, because the patterns of behavior won't change over holidays. They'll even get even worse.
They get worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that for me and my experience, you know, and it takes two to tango, like most things. I feel like sometimes some years on purpose, you might be running late
Mm-hmm,
because you
mm-hmm,
know that I'm
mm-hmm,
waiting for my son to come home. But then, of course, you're 1 minute late, which if that happened any other day of the year, I'm like, okay, whatever, you're a minute late. But because I've been waiting since 6 a.m. for you to come home, every
mm-hmm.
minute feels like an eternity. And so then that brings out the worst of me, where it's like, you're doing this on purpose. You're making me, go crazy. And so I feel like it takes two. It's like, don't sabotage it.
Right.
If they do try to poke you, which they probably will, what can you control about it and what can you do about it? If you can't do anything about it, you're just gonna have to, let it go. If it's something that's like big enough to file a show cause, that
Mm-hmm.
might be what you have to do. But I think for those who are in high conflict, co-parenting situations, you learn to expect that something's going to go wrong.
Yeah, they tend to enjoy it. And we've
Mm-hmm.
talked about this before too. They will not change,
Mm-hmm. No.
So even though we all have this hope, hope, hope for quite a while, they won't change. And so Christmas patterns or holiday patterns are the same, right? So like they may manipulate their children, they could use them as pawns, right? Like, not really, take them to event, but they didn't really need to go, but they insist that the kids come, and the kids are like, I don't really want to go, right? But they
Mm-hmm.
like, and it's not really for the kids, it's for themselves to show, right? Like I had that once, not during Christmas, but another time where it wasn't, they really wanted them to go, and it wasn't for them at all. It was just to show them off so that's kind of can come up during the holidays too. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah, and that brought up for me thinking, I learned not to share what I was planning on doing. So, like, if your town has some kind of, every town has something, right? Whether it's
Hmm.
a light tour or the Christmas tree lighting or, whatever the case may be. If they get wind of something that you are looking forward to doing with the kids, you better believe they're going to go do it first and take that from you. So yeah, I think you're right. Just preparing yourself, it's learning to play the game, right? And then I think also a big thing is we've talked about this in several of our talks is setting those boundaries. And so
Hmm.
if it's somebody who, when they drop the kids off at your house, are they going to be blowing your phone up for the rest of the day to interrupt your time? Maybe silence them for the day, block their number for the day. The kids are with you, there's no emergency going on. So turn them off and don't let them interrupt your time.
Another thing that comes up too, and it came up in my childhood, is the Disney dad or mom, because both of them can do it. So my dad could afford to buy more gifts,
Mm-hmm.
right, than my mom. And so it would be more of that type of thing, right? Like, and as a kid, you're pretty impressionable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would come up a lot. And I know I feel bad for my mom now, right? Because she couldn't compete, right? But in the
Mm-hmm.
in the end of it all, like, because both my parents have died, I love my mother so much more. Like, it was such a deep connection there, other than just giving gifts. So, not that you know that as a child, but
Mm-hmm.
this comes up a lot, right? They come home
Yeah.
or you're switching and you're like, oh, look, I got, the new PlayStation. And, and then you as yourself, your budget's quite much lower, and you don't feel, um, that can kind of be bothersome.
Yeah, oh, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, like you said, it's kind of one of those things that as a grown up, we can look back and reflect on that.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly kids can say things that aren't intended as
Mm-hmm.
hurtful, but can come across that way, especially if, like my son has asked for something for Christmas, and I'm like, no, I'm not getting that for you. And it's like, okay, well, I'll just ask dad. And I'm like, okay. And so it's just like they play the game too. And then the financial picture of it, of where, especially if like you're not getting the child support that you're supposed to be getting, and so you're paying the bills and putting the food on the table, and like you said, you have less to put towards the toys. It makes you feel like you're just never going to add up.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, because I was in the same situation where when I went to dad's, it was all about what you're wearing, what toys you're getting, and but that was more stepmom, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean, trying to, and stepmom would say things like against my mom about like not providing the clothes or the toys, and meanwhile my mom's working her butt off to keep
Mm-hmm.
the lights on, and that hurt. Even as a kid, I knew that that was
Mm-hmm.
not nice, right? But then, like, as you get older, do you even remember what you got when you were years old for Christmas? No, but you know
No.
what? You remember making cookies with
Mm-hmm.
mom. You remember decorating the tree with mom. You remember all of the things that you just do together, spending time. And so I think for those out there who are struggling, which millions of people are right now, it's not about what's under the tree. It's about creating those
Yeah.
memories and spending time together. As corny as that sounds, that is really what it comes down to. And that's what will stick with your kids.
Yeah. And that, having that love there, right? Another thing is too, is I've had this as well, in my childhood more so, is the disgruntled family members, or the ones that, so they know you're getting, they don't like your ex, right? And there's valid reasons why they don't like your ex, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they keep harping on that in front of the children during the
Mm.
holidays, right?
Yep.
And I had that growing up. I've had it a few times with my own kids, and we really had to shut it down,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, but I can still remember a lot of times, like the family members would get a little bit too open of their expressions about, and it actually happened on both sides, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously my grandmother was very, very protective of my mom, and my dad and stepmother were high conflict, right? So, but it happened on both sides, and I think it still happens today. So again, we go back to the
Hmm.
boundaries, right?
Yeah, and I think, and my family still does that too. And yes, you have to be the one to shut it down, unfortunately. And with boundaries, nobody respects them. So it's just like it's not like you're saying it once, you're still saying it
Mm-hmm.
years later. And even if they're well-meaning conversations, like my dad will ask me how things are going with co-parenting. And even if my kids running around, I'm like, this isn't just really the space for that, right? Because even if they're like, oh, how are things going? And it usually turns into like, have you been to court lately? What's going on with the child support? And it's like, I don't, this is not the time or the place. Like, we can talk, we can sidebar about this at a
Mm-hmm.
later time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's really frustrating because you do, I feel like, consistently just have to set the
Mm-hmm.
tone of time and place.
Yeah, it was years for my mom, and finally she just got really mad one day and just said enough, right? It just was
Mm-hmm.
years and years, because the hurt runs deep, and in
Mm-hmm.
some of these situations I get. But and kids, it's funny that even though they're running around or they're kind of
They know.
they're kind of like, you
Yeah.
know, if they hear their name or they hear their dad's or mom's name, they kind of, and they're not, they know more than we think, and they catch on to
Oh,
things,
yeah.
even the energy level, right? Like if there's,
Mm-hmm.
so I love, right, sidebar it. We'll talk about this not during the holidays
Mm-hmm.
or not when the child is around, right? Because
Yeah.
it's important you have support, just not during the holidays. So
Mm-hmm.
is there any other ways that,
Yeah. Oh,
sorry,
sorry.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say before I forget, because we were talking about extended family members, something that I struggled with, and it's gotten better finally, because again, it's like years of consistency. Everyone has their own traditions during the month of December, and it's like, Aunt Susie's doing her
Mm-hmm.
cookie baking thing on this day, and the family's going to church on this day at this time, and the family dinner. And so it's always like, can you just switch your time? Can you ask to switch weekends? Can you switch a day? And especially with high conflict, it never works out. And so having to communicate that, no, I'm not willing to ask to switch, is always comes across as just like unwillingness, or like you don't care about the traditions, but they don't really understand the battle that it takes to even do something as a
Mm-hmm.
simple swap,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, we got to get to the point where I'm like, if it falls on a day that I have him, we
Mm-hmm.
will come. If I don't have him, you can just count him out
Mm-hmm.
of the attendance, right? And of course, people's feelings are hurt. And we're so lucky that we have so many loved ones that want us
Mm-hmm.
to be involved. But that's a hard lesson, I think, for the whole family, is that your child's not going to be at everything, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not an easy. Yes, if you have a healthy co-parenting relationship, swapping a couple
Yeah.
hours here and there isn't a big deal. But in high conflict co-parenting, it's always a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's always a fight. And so it's just not even worth it. I'm like, unless it's a wedding or a funeral,
Yeah, it's
forget
too
it.
much, right? It's too tiring, right?
Yes.
It's too much. And that goes to the, for people that are listening or going to listen later, is also making sure you have a really detailed or strict parenting plan, right? Especially during the holiday seasons, right? Like,
Very
yeah, yeah.
specific time, location of swap, who, if you do houses, like we do house to house swapping, who is driving them, who's doing the picking up and the dropping off. And you really have to be, and people say, oh, I don't want it to be that specific, which again, I get, if you're in a normal relationship where people can be flexible, I understand that. But if you're in a high conflict, you need as much detail as possible. If there's any gray area, they are going to exploit that too, in ways that you can't even think of, because our
Right.
minds don't think that
Yeah.
way.
Do not put reasonable in your head. And do
Yeah.
not put it in your parenting plan either. There's no reasonable, because what you're reasonable is not going to be the high conflicts reasonable,
Mm-mm.
right? Like, so don't even think that they're going to be fair or whatever. And it's exhausting, right? Like, it's tiring to battle these toxic behaviors all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again,
Mm-hmm.
we can start talking about tips to help them through, because um, we've been through it. You need a lot of, I mean, we can say self-care. I mean, that's such a, we all say it's self-care, but it really does matter, right? And
Mm-hmm.
um, do you have
How are
any
you
other,
protecting yourself during this
yeah.
is really what it comes down to. And whether you want to call that self-care or not,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I didn't mean to cut you off,
No,
but
it's okay.
certainly surrounding yourself with people who are going to help you, not hurt the situation. So if you have a friend who's like ready to rip your ex's face off, probably not the best person to have around, because if one thing
Mm-hmm.
goes sideways, now you've got them to deal with,
Mm-hmm.
wanting to attack, and you're just kind of like, I don't know. So I think who you surround yourself with and what you spend your time doing is super important during the holidays.
Yeah, and let go of those big holiday expectations. Like,
Mm-hmm.
for a while with my mom, I saw her sometimes. It would, for some reason, it was always Christmas Eve she had me, and we talked years later, and it was okay for her, because that was like, this was her time, right? So she,
Mm-hmm.
and she planned to be with her family during Christmas Day, but um, it's it is one day
Mm-hmm.
out of a full 2 week. Most people, kids have 2 weeks off. We put a lot of emphasis on that day,
Mm-hmm.
but we all do, but the 24th, 26th, or New Year's, or whatever, are also, make you, whatever the day is that you're with your kids and you're having fun and loving them, and is also a really good day during that time.
Yeah, and like I said, and I love that about your mom. And it really does take being the bigger
Mm-hmm.
person, which I hate even saying that, because when you're going through hell, you're like, I am so sick of being the bigger
Mm-hmm.
person. Like, when do I get to throw a pity party and have everything go my way? But it's just letting go, like you said, of some of those expectations, letting go of, it has to be on the 25th, it has to be, this.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I said, you get to learn, like, oh, it's okay if he's not here on Christmas morning. I'd rather have
Mm-hmm.
that time with him where we're not rushing out the door, where everyone can just relax. And if you are somebody who celebrates with your extended family, and I think our this generation is getting a lot better about this, where nobody likes to go to five different houses on Christmas. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of people are choosing to stay home with their nuclear family now versus running all over the
Mm-hmm.
place. And so even your extended family can pick a different day
Mm-hmm.
that everyone can get together. Like you said, the week after Christmas, it's dead. Nothing's
Mm-hmm.
going on.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's just blobbing on the couch watching movies.
Mm-hmm.
And so pick one of those days that you have your kid to get the family together. And then now they don't have to rush. It's one less thing for them to have to do on the 25th, too.
Yeah, and also remember, what we said before is, remember um, that we what I was, sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. Okay, what do you want your kids to remember? Because that's like, when we were talking about making cookies, or um, who you spending the day with your mom and you love, right, or something.
Mm-hmm.
That means more than really anything. And we have to be mindful of our own emotions, right? So when we're as you said, when is it ever our turn, right? Like, why do we always have to be the bigger person? Because at the end of the day, it's for the children, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
what they remember. And I remember with my mom, who had a challenging divorce and separation, I didn't hear any about that stuff, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
years later, I asked, right? But so remember, when you're on these during the holiday season, that remember what you're creating memories with your kids, right? So if you're all mad and angry around the house on Christmas Day because your ex is, as you said, we go back to boundaries, right? But you have to remember that these memories Because we do tend to, as we said at the beginning, to have a lot of, we put a lot of, I was going to say,
Like
help me here.
emphasis.
Emphasis, thanks, on the holiday season, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just thinking, remember why we're creating these memories, and these memories will last a lifetime, like they have for me.
Mm. Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, if you have, depending on how old your kids are, if you have little kids, they just want the holiday magic. They don't care who
Mm-hmm.
is really providing it to them, right? And by holiday magic, I mean all of those non-tangible things that we have been talking about. And as they get older, and that you're remembering your childhood. Like I said, you're not remembering, oh, for my 8th birthday, I mean, of course, we remember some presents, but we're not attaching who spent more money on me means that they love me the most, right? It's, even as a happily remarried person now, I see, social media does this to all of us. I see people doing all of these different things during the holiday, and I'm like, oh, I want to do that. I want to do that. But there's just not enough time in the day. And
Mm-hmm.
so just and then when you get to these places, you're like, oh, I'd kind of rather just be home watching movies by the Christmas tree. And your kids probably want that too. And so just put more emphasis on just spending time together. I think that's what matters at the end of the day. And they want a happy mom or dad. And so if
Mm-hmm.
you're letting yourself get riled up and so distressed over whatever their other parent is doing to you, or whatever the case
Mm-hmm.
may be, and you're letting that ruin the time that they have to spend with you, that's really the unfortunate part.
Yeah, it makes it harder. And we're not saying this is easy. The
No. Oh my
high
gosh,
conflict
no.
people are they're challenging, they're exhausting. We both know it.
Mm-hmm.
Many people out there know it. So I think that's the reason why we're doing the series, right? But really be gentle with yourself, and practice a lot of self-compassion, right? Like,
Right.
no, and as you said before, like the first time you go through these holidays with people, right? The high conflict, the first ones, you don't really know what's going to happen. You're just kind of all sorting things out. So just know that you will get through this, and get the right support, right? Family, friends, coaches, whatever, and you will get through it, and your kids will have a good time too. Like that, it's really possible, right? That
Mm-hmm.
that your children will love Christmas just as much as they did, or even more so, depending on the situation of what
Mm-hmm.
your marriage was like before. So
Oh yeah.
yeah,
I
do you have
know.
any?
My kid, this is the first year he was like super excited. I mean, again, we've been doing this since he was born basically, but this year he's like, "Mom, I'm so lucky I get 2 Christmases." I'm like,
Mhm.
"Yes."
Yeah, didn't you do that? I did that. I did
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I was excited, but he's a very sensitive child, which I was too, and so he's always just kind of like, I wish everyone can be together on the
Mhm.
holiday, which is sweet, but again, it comes with that guilt that we always talk about. But this year, I think he's finally just catching on to the fact that he gets like 2 of everything, and so I'm like, okay, I'm glad you're excited.
Yeah, that is one perk I remember being as a kid, getting two. But yeah, well, this was a great talk. If any have any questions, just put in the comment. I know we're back in January for the fourth of the series, and it's about post abuse after, which is pretty common with these high conflict characters as
Mhm.
well. But if no one has any comments, do you have anything else? Like, do you have anything coming up? Or I know you're busy with Christmas and clients and stuff.
I actually was going to let you know and the audience know that I am finishing up the edits on our podcast that we
Oh,
recorded
yes, yes,
together.
yes.
And so that should be coming out today or
Oh,
tomorrow.
good. I'll share it on my end too. And yeah, so great. It was great to have you on, Shauna, as usual. And we'll see you in January. And happy holidays, everybody.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.